What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved comedic actors ends up in a live TV confrontation so tense that he walks off set mid-interview? The answer turned out to be far more complex than anyone expected. Before we dive into what really went down, make sure you're subscribed and let me know in the comments what you think pushed things over the edge. Because this one got messy, it all started on the Today Show. Ben Stiller arrived that morning expecting a routine press spotlight questions. A few jokes, a story about his new film, a smile for the cameras, and done. That's how these things usually go. But from the moment he sat down, something was different, even through the screen. You could feel it, the tension humming just beneath the surface. The host began as usual, warm and professional. "Ben, it's great to have you back," they said, smiling. Ben smiled too, joking about the early call time, how coffee had become his co-star that morning. The audience laughed. Everything seemed fine until the first question landed. "So, Ben," the host began carefully, "there's been a lot of conversation lately about older comedies and whether certain jokes would still be acceptable today. Do you ever look back at your past work and cringe?" The laughter in the studio died almost instantly. Ben paused, his trademark grin softening. "Well," he said, "context matters a lot. Comedy evolves. Society evolves. I'm proud of my work, but I also understand that we keep learning. What doesn't help," he continued, "is judging everything through today's lens without remembering when or why it was made." The host nodded, but their tone shifted slightly. "But don't you think artists have a responsibility to acknowledge when they've hurt people? Some say certain films crossed a line." Ben's posture changed, shoulders tensing, tone firming. "There's a difference between acknowledging impact and publicly condemning yourself for something that reflected its time," he said. "I never set out to offend anyone. But comedy pushes boundaries, that's what it does. And yes, times change. That's part of the process." The host's expression sharpened. "So you don't feel any regret about those choices?" Ben looked up. "That's not what I said," he replied, his voice harder now. "I said context matters. I've grown. Everyone has. But I'm not going to sit here and apologize for my entire career." The air in the studio grew thick. Ben's jaw tightened. His hands gripped the armrests just slightly. The audience shifted uneasily. Still, the host pressed on. "Let's talk about your recent comments about the industry," they said. "You've been outspoken on certain issues. Some people have called you hypocritical, given your privilege. How do you respond to that?" Ben let out a small, humorless laugh. "Hypocritical. Because I have opinions. Because I care about the business I'm in? I'm not sure I follow." "Well," the host continued, "you've criticized parts of the Hollywood system while still benefiting from it. People are wondering if that's genuine commitment to change or just performance." Ben's expression hardened completely. "Performative?" he repeated slowly. "That's an interesting accusation, especially during what's supposed to be a promotional interview. Are you actually interested in my perspective, or is this some kind of gotcha setup?" The host didn't flinch. "I'm asking legitimate questions our audience wants answered." They said coolly, "Are you though?" Ben shot back. "Because it feels like you've already written the story, and I'm just supposed to play my part. I came here to talk about my work, not to be cross-examined like I'm on trial." "Your work is part of these conversations," the host said. "You can't separate the art from the artist." "I'm not separating anything," Ben replied, his voice rising now. "But there's a way to have real discussion, respectful, balanced. This isn't that. This is a setup. You're not trying to talk, you're trying to make me look bad." The audience went silent. Camera operators froze. You could practically hear the heartbeat of the room through the broadcast. "I think you're being defensive," the host said finally. "That was the wrong move." "Defensive," Ben repeated, leaning forward. "You've spent 10 minutes implying I'm a bad person, questioning my integrity, my motives, and now that's your takeaway. That I'm too defensive." The host straightened, trying to recover. "I'm not implying you're bad, Ben. I'm giving you the chance to respond to public criticism. Ben shook his head slowly. No, you're framing everything I say in the worst possible way. There's a difference between engaging with criticism and walking into an ambush. And right now. He paused, eyes fixed on the host. This feels exactly like an ambush. The silence that followed was deafening. Live television had gone completely off script, and everyone in that studio knew it. Asterisk, I think you're overreacting, the host said, their voice controlled but tense. In the background, a few crew members exchanged uneasy glances. Everyone could feel it. The air in the studio had gone brittle. These are conversations that need to happen, the host added. Then have them, Ben snapped. Have them honestly. Have them with curiosity instead of this prosecutorial tone. You know what the real problem is? He leaned forward, eyes locked on the host. You've already decided who I am and what I represent, and nothing I say here is going to change that because you're not listening. The host opened their mouth to respond. But Ben didn't give them the chance. You asked me about growth and evolution. He continued, his voice steady but sharp. Well, here's something I've actually learned. Real conversations about difficult topics require good faith from both sides. They require a willingness to hear something that might challenge your worldview. What they don't require is someone sitting across from you with a list of grievances disguised as questions. I have to push back on that, the host interjected quickly. These aren't grievances. They're topics your producers thought would make good TV. Ben cut in. Let's be honest about what's happening here. You invited me to promote my film. But somewhere along the way, someone decided it'd be more interesting to try to take me down a notch. And sure, maybe that makes for drama. But don't call it journalism. It's not. The host's smile thinned. The tone of professionalism began to crack. You're a public figure, Ben. You don't get to control the narrative. You don't get to dictate how people interpret your actions. I'm not trying to control anything, Ben shot back, his voice low but intense. I'm trying to have a conversation with someone who seems more interested in scoring points than understanding anything. This, he gestured around the set. This is exactly what's wrong with how we talk about complex issues now. Everything has to be flattened into extremes. Someone's either a villain or a saint. Right or wrong. Cancelled or celebrated. There's no room for nuance anymore, so you're the victim now. The host asked, their words dripping with sarcasm. Ben's eyes narrowed. That right there, that's what I'm talking about. I express frustration at the tone of this conversation, and you immediately twist it into victimhood. It's a rhetorical trick, one that shuts down any legitimate criticism of your approach by making me sound like I'm whining. You are whining, the host fired back. The audience gasped audibly this time. The polite daytime mask had completely fallen away. You came on this show. You agreed to an interview? And now you're angry because you don't like the questions. The tension was electric. The cameras kept rolling, but no one dared move. Ben sat back, silent for several long seconds. When he finally spoke, his tone was quiet, controlled but cutting. You know what's interesting about this moment? He said. We're live, right? Millions of people are watching this unfold in real time, and I think they can see exactly what's happening. I came here in good faith, ready to talk. And instead, I'm being treated like I'm on trial. And the more I try to respond honestly, the more you twist it into something else. I'm not twisting anything, the host protested. I'm holding you accountable. Accountable for what? Exactly. Ben asked. For having a career. For making comedy. For saying something you don't personally agree with. This isn't accountability, it's performance. You're performing toughness for your audience. You're showing them how brave you are for confronting someone with a platform. But there's nothing brave about this. There's nothing noble about trying to humiliate someone on live TV. No one's trying to humiliate you, the host replied, though their tone betrayed irritation. Really? Ben said. Because from where I'm sitting, that's exactly what's happening. You've created a setup where anything I say can and will be used against me. If I defend myself, I'm defensive. If I explain, I'm making excuses. If I challenge your framing, I'm avoiding responsibility. It's a no-win situation, and you know it. The host leaned back, crossing their arms. Maybe if you stopped focusing on how the questions are asked and just answered them, we wouldn't be having this problem. Ben's expression hardened. I've answered every single question you've asked, he said, his voice steady but cutting. You just don't like the answers. And that's fine, you don't have to. But don't stand there pretending this is about accountability when what you really want is a headline. The host's jaw tightened. And what headline would that be? You know what I think? The host said, their tone sharp now, professionalism starting to crack. I think you're used to interviews where everyone treats you with kid gloves, where people laugh at your jokes. Praise your work and never push back. The moment someone actually challenges you, you fall apart. Ben leaned forward, his voice rising. That's not a challenge, he shot back. A challenge would be a tough but fair question, asked with genuine curiosity, not preloaded judgment. What you're doing isn't about understanding. It's about winning. Win what? The host asked with a bitter laugh. This isn't a competition, isn't it? Ben replied, his tone cutting. Because it feels like you're keeping score. Every time I try to explain something, you're already loading your next attack. You're not hearing me? You're waiting for your turn to talk. That's not an interview. That's a sparring match. And I didn't sign up to be your opponent. Maybe you should have, the host said coldly. Maybe if you spent less time in your Hollywood bubble and more time listening to people who disagree with you, you'd be better prepared for conversations like this. Ben stared at them for a long moment. The anger in his eyes softened into something heavier, disappointment. You really believe that, don't you? He said quietly. You think you're doing something noble right now? That this is about truth, or accountability, or whatever word helps you sleep at night. I am holding you accountable, the host replied firmly. No, Ben said, shaking his head. You're grandstanding. There's a difference. Accountability is about encouraging understanding and growth. What you're doing is public shaming, wrapped in a moral bow. And the worst part? He paused. You probably can't even tell the difference anymore. The host's jaw tightened. I don't need you to lecture me about journalism. Clearly, someone needs to, Ben said, his voice turning steely. Because what you're doing here, this isn't journalism. It's corrosive. It's performative. It teaches people that the point of conversation is to destroy the other person, to expose, humiliate, and dominate instead of connect, to find their weak spot and hammer it until they break. That's not dialogue. That's Is that really the world you want to create? Don't turn this around on me, the host snapped. You're the one who walked in here with an attitude. I walked in expecting a conversation, Ben countered. What I got was an interrogation. And yeah, I have an attitude about that because it's wrong. It's toxic. And it says a lot about how broken our communication has become. Oh, here we go, the host said, rolling their eyes. The culture lecture from the wealthy Hollywood actor. Ben gave a small, humorless laugh. And there it is, he said. The moment you drop the mask and go straight for the personal attack. Wealthy Hollywood actor. As if that phrase alone invalidates anything I say. As if having success means I don't get to care about how people treat one another. Your success means you have a platform, the host fired back. And what you're doing with it right now is complaining about being asked hard questions. They're not hard questions, Ben said sharply. They're hostile ones. There's a difference. A hard question invites reflection. A hostile question traps you. No matter how you answer, you lose. That's what this is. A trap. The host's smile had disappeared completely. I fundamentally disagree with your characterization of this interview. Of course you do, Ben said flatly. Because admitting otherwise would require the same self-reflection you keep demanding from me. But that's not allowed here, is it? The rules only ever apply one way. You're being ridiculous, the host said, dismissing him with a wave. Am I? Ben asked, leaning forward again. Then answered this: when you prepared for this interview, did you think about what you wanted to learn from me? Did you have any curiosity about my experience, my process, my perspective? Or did you just make a list of things you could nail me on? The host hesitated just for a second, but it was enough. Ben caught it and pressed. Yeah, he said quietly. That's what I thought. This was never about discovery. It was about performance. About moral theater. And that's the real tragedy here, because there are important conversations to be had. About how comedy changes. About privilege, about responsibility, about growth. But we're not having any of those conversations. Because you're more interested in looking tough than in actually understanding. I'm engaging just fine, the host said defensively. No, Ben replied. You're reacting. And there's a difference. Engaging means listening. Reacting means waiting to respond. And if you can't tell the difference, then this isn't journalism anymore. It's performance art. Asterisk, but you've already made it clear, Ben said, his voice quiet but edged with finality, that you've decided I'm wrong about everything. So tell me, what's the point of continuing this? The point, the host replied firmly, is that you committed to doing this interview. Under false pretenses, apparently, Ben shot back. I was told this would be a conversation about my work. Instead, it's turned into a public trial of my character, and I'm done participating in it. The words hung in the air like a live wire. I'm done participating in it. The studio went still. Even the host froze, their composure cracking as they realized Ben wasn't bluffing. You can't just leave, he said finally, a hint of panic breaking through. We're live, watch me, Ben said simply, standing up and beginning to unclip his microphone. Ben, come on, the host said, their tone shifting from sharp to pleading. Don't be dramatic. We're having a conversation. No, Ben replied evenly, carefully removing the mic. You're having a performance. I'm removing myself from it. There's a difference. This is incredibly unprofessional, the host snapped, their voice trembling between frustration and disbelief. You're walking out on a live broadcast. Ben paused, microphone in hand, and looked them straight in the eye. You want to talk about unprofessional? Let's do that. It's unprofessional to ambush a guest with an agenda that was never agreed upon. It's unprofessional to treat someone's presence like an opportunity for a takedown. It's unprofessional, he said, voice rising slightly to disguise a hit piece as an interview. So you seem walking out, because staying would mean endorsing this kind of behavior. And I won't do that. You're making a huge mistake, the host warned, desperation creeping into their tone. People are going to see this as you running away from accountability. Let them, Ben said with a small shrug. I'd rather walk away from a bad situation than sit here and take abuse dressed up as journalism. That's what this has been, abuse, pretending to be accountability. And I'm done playing along. So that's it. The host demanded, rising from their chair now. You're just going to run. I'm not running, Ben said, standing as well. His voice was calm, controlled, resolute. I'm making a choice. I'm choosing not to participate in something fundamentally dishonest. And I think anyone watching right now understands why. You've spent the last 20 minutes trying to make me the villain, and when that didn't work, you got frustrated. This was never about a dialogue. It was about you needing to prove something. And I refuse to be your prop. The host's face was flushed anger, embarrassment, or both. You're proving my point, they said sharply. You can't handle criticism. I can handle criticism just fine, Ben replied evenly. What I can't handle is bad faith. And that's what this has been from the start. You didn't invite me here for conversation. You invited me to be a target. And I'm declining that role. This is going to look terrible for you. The host tried again, one last grasp for control. Maybe, Ben said. Or maybe people will see this and understand exactly why I left. Maybe they'll see what I see, someone more interested in creating a spectacle than a conversation. Either way, I can live with my choice. He paused. Can you live with yours? The host opened their mouth, but no sound came out. In the thick silence that followed, Ben set the microphone gently on the chair, then turned and began walking toward the edge of the set. The cameras, unsure of what else to do, followed him as he exited the stage. The sound of his footsteps echoed across the studio floor. "Ben?" The host called after him, their voice cracking slightly. "Come on, let's reset. We can start over." Ben stopped mid-stride and turned just for a moment. For a heartbeat, it looked like he might come back. Then he shook his head. "No, we can't," he said. "Because the problem isn't what was Sadit's, the entire framework. You can't reset that. You came into this with an agenda, not a conversation. And honestly, I think the audience deserves better than watching us pretend to be civil after everything that's happened. So you're really doing this?" The host asked quietly now, their voice small, almost defeated. "I really am," Ben said. "And I hope someday you'll ask yourself why. I hope you'll think about whether what you're doing serves any purpose beyond feeding your need to feel morally superior. Because that's what this was about, not truth, not accountability, not even good television. It was about you getting to say you took down Ben Stiller. And I'm not here to help you write that story.